Hello and welcome to TA Made Simple, where Bob Cook from the Manchester Institute for Psychotherapy makes that theory of transactional analysis more accessible and explains some of the concepts in transactional analysis. And in this episode, we're going to look at the fundamental underpin of TA, which is contracting.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Rory. And it's really is fundamental. Contractual theory is fundamental to TA in this sense that Barrett Burns wanted to have transparency, wanted to have a sense where you had a bilateral exchange instead of the old psychoanalytical tradition, which is very much a sort of, in TA terms, parent-child interpretive transactions. He wanted to have adult, bilateral, mutual, explicit contracts where two people would take charge of the therapy or the sessions or whatever the contract was.
Yes, I mean, he, like his contemporary Rogers, he was trying to kind of democratize therapy, wasn't he? Both of them pushed away from this kind of power base of the therapist being the all-encompassing personal knowledge, and to have a more, as you say, bilateral or equal relationship. And he put a lot of stock in contracts, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah, and let's take a definition of a contract then.
Okay.
So his definition, which came from the 1961 book, Transactional Analysis Psychotherapy, that a contract is simply a bilateral, mutual, explicit measure of action, really. In other words, it had to have a specific measurable outcome.
Yes.
And he really did want the contract for the session to come from the here and now, the adult to adult ego state. Because if you took it from the child ego state, which is more in the unconscious and more at a different time, for example, the client could come from an adapted place or a rebellious place, and certainly not an adult position in the here and now. So the beginning of the therapy with a TA therapist is bilateral, mutual, explicit to a well-devised outcome from the here and now position, not from a parent place, what should be, must be, ought to be, could be, but for a here and now. And that's in a wonderful place, isn't it, to start therapy?
Yeah, it literally starts as you mean to go on. And I think for people watching this who may not be in the TA world, maybe in other modalities, there's different forms of contracting. So the contracting that a lot of people may be used to is the businessy contract, things like confidentiality, contracts such as who you can disclose to, there's a fee paid, data protection, all that kind of thing in contracting. What we're really talking here, Bob, is a therapy contract, isn't it?
Yeah, a treatment contract.
A treatment contract, yes.
Yeah. So somebody comes to you for therapy and say they want to work, be more relaxed instead of depressed, for example, then you might take that for a contract. Now, in transaction analysis, there's two types of treatment contracts.
Okay.
Byrne didn't really name it this way, but certainly later TA theorists dubs into, like Stewart, for example, soft contracts and hard contracts. So the hard treatment contracts will be those which are behaviorable, which are specific, which are measurable, achievable, and the softer contracts were the exploring contracts. They came out of some of Burns' works of different types of contracts. But you are right. There's business contracts, there's treatment contracts, and also there's sessional contracts. So you have overall contracts. So you got the overall contract to be relaxed and not depressed. And you have sessional contracts from session to session working towards that overall contract.
Yes. Yes, and it's interesting just to hear you talk about this, Bob, because a lot of people, certainly in the humanistic world, would probably not do that. They would do their initial contracting and just work what the client brings. But it really brings up an interesting point. Without a goal, you can't score. So,
oh, wonderful.
So, So without putting something into place, you might get drift in therapy. You could get therapy drift where it could go on indefinitely.
Yeah.
And that does happen. You get clients who are drifting. And it is a principal position for a therapist to work with whatever the client brings. want to make that clear. But in TA, it is more, the whole therapy is more structured, isn't it? It's a more structured approach, I think. Yeah.
And the contract itself is structured. So, for
Yes.
example, somebody comes and said they want to be, like I just said, they want to be relaxed rather than depressed, for example.
Yes.
That's a positive contract, okay? Because you've got a positive goal. What you wouldn't take in TA is what's called a negative contract, which I want to stop something.
Setting people
I want to stop smoking, or I want to stop having sex, or I want to stop XX, or whatever it is. That's setting people up to fail, actually, and certainly is a negative contract. So in TA, you would definitely go for the positive contract.
That's really interesting, isn't it? So that comes down to the achievable side of things, because say I want to stop smoking. That's quite a big ask. I want to stop taking drugs, or I want to stop whatever. That's a big ask, but being achievable.
Yeah, you go towards positive achievability is the aim, not heading towards negativity.
Yeah.
Another thing in contracting, which I don't always do, but I bear it in mind, and I did do a video of it recently, a 5-stage plan of contracting. So, number 1, what do you want to change? Number 2, how might you sabotage that change? Because really, Rory, of course, if they didn't sabotage it in some way, then they wouldn't be coming to the therapy door.
Yes.
So it's like, how might you sabotage this contract? Thirdly, and what do you need to do to achieve the contract? Fourthly, what support do you want from me or other people in your life to help you achieve the contract? And fifthly, and I think one of the most important, how will you celebrate once you've achieved your contract? 5-stage plan.
5-stage plan. That's interesting. And it almost speaks from a coaching point of view. That's the kind of planning having coaching, isn't it? Where you would give people an overview of an overview. Yeah.
There's one big difference there, though, because you're correct. Coaching is very future oriented. Yes. And I like the idea of contracting being positive and looking towards actual positive goals. But number 2 in our contract plan is heading towards the past. TA is a developmental model, how the past affects the present. So number 2, how do you stop yourself achieving what you want, is the psychodynamic question. Yeah.
And it's also, I suspect, where the majority of the work's carried out.
Yes. What's happened in the past? What's the patterns to stop you gaining the change today that you want? That's the psychodynamic question. I think the most important question, and quite correct, where the work mostly happens.
Yes. Now, Byrne was really quite clear on contracts. He said that once you'd come to the end of the contract and the work was complete, and then you could recontract for another piece of work.
Right. And I don't know if this is true, Roy, because I trained in 86 to where we are now. And it was often said by my trainer, and I've never read this, I think it's in the gossip, Barrett Burns said, okay, exactly what you've just said there, and always go for a 1-session cure. And if you can get your contract achieved, whether it be in 1 session or 10 minutes, that's it. And then you recontract again.
Yes.
So absolutely, that's what he believed in.
How interesting. And in fact, TA has a contractual school. There was the contract school, wasn't there?
Classic school. The classic school has this hallmark contractual theory. And of course, the classical school is the Burnian school, 1960, right the way to 1970. The first hallmarks, the real epoch of transaction analysis, and contracts is there right in the middle. So you have an explicit bilateral mutual agreement to a well-defined outcome from adult to adult, not from a child position, not from a parent position, but a well-thought-out contract, as you quite rightly said, going toward a desired outcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's been. I think you made the contracting really clear. It is a area of confusion. Certainly, I think for new therapists, certainly for therapists who maybe not in the field of TA, because there's to find there's different forms of contracting. And in fact, even in the humanistic school, you know, I may very well say to a client, well, what is it you hope to achieve? Do a soft contract there to get a sense of what it is they want to look at. And sometimes they're not sure, but sometimes, you know, they'll say, I want to.
Yeah, may I ask you a question on that? Because I know you're an expert in the humanistic tradition. So I'd like to ask you a question on exactly that. Now, I've heard you many, many times say that, of course, somebody who's client-centered will go with what the client comes up with. And so how from a purist position, does the therapist actually end? You know, in other words, so if you go on and on with client brings, you could be there for however many years, if you like.
Well, I think it's something that I speak about a lot. I think that very few people practice traditional person-centered therapy, as you know, as Rogers, as you see in the Gloria films, maybe. I think very, very, very few people practice that. Okay. I think what's happened through the years is that there's been a slight shift from the, you know, the more classical school of it to a more structured approach. And in fact, one of the things that you know, good practice dictates is that a regular review.
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, I was supervising someone today, and you know, we were talking around the 6-week review. You know, and the importance of the 6-week review. Now, there is a principled position with some person-centered colleagues who say, well, I wouldn't do that.
Right.
And I guess that there's a couple of things really, Bob. First of all, if you're an independent practitioner, you need to think of the, you know, how long you're going to keep clients for.
Yes.
And what is why are they attending therapy? Is it therapy they're getting? So, you know, from an ethical principle position, I think that's something to think of. I'm an independent practitioner. But those colleagues who work within organizations, they're bookended by the amount of sessions.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So I guess a person-centered therapy working in brief therapy, or maybe 10 or 15 sessions, which is still relatively brief, would ask a client at the beginning, and then
Right.
And also there's the core 10 and the you know, the assessment forms where they could do an assessment. So yes, that's my view of contracting in the humanistic world, Bob. It is, isn't it? And there's a few connections and crossovers, I guess. So as usual, Bob doesn't get paid for these videos. He does them for the love of them. And what we're having a look at, what's our next video on theory going to be, Bob?
Oh, we've got so many. But let's pick the concept of symbiosis.
Oh, that has to be one not to be missed. So symbiosis. Okay. Well, until we meet in the next video, which will be TA theory and symbiosis, I will see you later, Bob.
You will. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.